Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today at ARTIVISM, the Power of Art for Social Transformation. This is our 8th season. Today we have with us Mary Wasacz. Mary will discuss her book, The Frailty of a Butterfly, My Journey Through Newborn Loss. As soon as Mary's third child, Cathy Anne, was born, the doctor handed her the baby. She initially looked like her sister, Mary Christina, but within seconds her features changed, her cheeks sank. She didn't cry and was turning blue. The doctor took the baby away, and Mary will speak to us about that experience and about her book, her life's work as a psychiatric nurse. So welcome, Mary.
Well, thank you for having me. This is my book, The Frailty of a Butterfly, My Journey Through Newborn Loss. And I was never a writer and never liked to write, but I wanted to tell the story. I thought it was an important story to tell. So I started, and I live in Scarsdale, New York, and the library started a critique group for writers. So I joined. And when I joined this, everybody seemed to have been published authors. It was very intimidating, this big meeting that we had. Well, they divided it up into groups, and so not everybody was published. The group is wonderful, and I am still in that group today. This is after 11 years. And this book would never have been published had I not got into this group. So, you got to look for things that are going to help you do what you need to do and what you want to do. So what happened with my story is I had a very easy pregnancy, no problems at all. Cathy Anne was my third child, and my 3-year-old Mary Christina and my 5-year-old John was looking forward to this baby. They were so excited. They would play with their dolls. They would change their dolls and stuffed animals' diapers, and they were going to be the best big brother and sister. They were just thrilled. There was no problem at all until I got to the hospital. I had mild contractions all day, and this was July 17th, 1977, when she was born. So I get to the hospital, they examined me and took me right into the delivery room. So in my book, chapter 1 begins in the delivery room. That's where all the action took place. That's the big incident that happened. So a couple of pushes, she was out. The doctor hands her to me, and she looked just like Mary Christina with her chubby cheeks. She was so cute. And then everything changed. Her face, her cheeks just sank, and she turned blue, and she wasn't breathing. So the doctor took her from me, gave her oxygen, and it took about 10 minutes before she was breathing on her own. So we prayed. We said a Hail Mary. Oh, please, God, help this baby. Let her breathe. We wanted this baby very much, and so did our children. So we prayed. Well, she did breathe, but it took 10 minutes, as I say, before she was breathing on her own. And then the nurse took her out of the delivery room to weigh her and do what she had to do. In the meantime, my pediatrician came rushing in, and he had examined her and ordered an X-ray of her heart and lungs. And he said they were fine. Well, they were fine on X-ray. She needed a lot more testing. Now, being a nurse did not help me in this situation because I knew there was something very wrong, but I had no idea what. I never saw a baby like this. Her ears were low. Her neck kind of had webbing, and she held her fingers in a distinct position. It was kind of a funny position, which I noticed. So John and I prayed, and thank God he was with me and that the doctor didn't have him leave, because so often when something goes wrong, the doctor wants the husband to step outside. He didn't. And my husband was a great support. And of course, as soon as he saw her, we had a name, Cathy Anne if it was a girl, and Anthony if it was a boy. So as soon as she was born, John says, "Hello, beautiful Cathy Anne. Welcome. We're so happy you're here." And at that point, of course, we thought everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. And what was so hard is waiting. What was wrong with this baby? It looked very serious to me. And John is saying, well, she's just a little baby. I think the doctors can fix her. And I'm saying, how can he not see what I'm seeing? I mean, her color was awful. And she was ashen gray and purple, her lips, and she was not a healthy looking baby. So the next day, the doctor, the pediatrician came in and he said, I think she should be transferred to Columbia Presbyterian. And he gave me a few other hospitals that we could send her to where they had more diagnostic tests. So I thought, well, that's probably a good idea. And I picked Columbia Presbyterian because I was teaching at Pace one day a week at I was doing some kind of a course in which students had to present different aspects of nursing. And this one student presented Columbia Presbyterian Babies Unit. So I feel God prepared us for where to send her because I knew something about the unit. And it was a very good decision. So she was transferred. And oh, that was the hardest thing. Here she was with all these tubes that they put into her. And she was transferred to Columbia Presbyterian. So we went down to see her, but we had to wait while they were examining her, which took hours. So we were so helpless, but what we did was pray. God walked with us every step of the way. And to have God on your side, I knew we would be okay. And I just prayed my children would be okay, because I worried, what effect is this going to have on my children for them to have a baby sister who dies? So the staff at Columbia were wonderful. They were very helpful to us. And so we just had to wait and wait. And so we went home. And it was so hard because we lived in Scarsdale. She was in New York City, and that driving back and forth was very taxing. So John had gone home to tell my mother and the whole situation. My mother was a very religious person, and she prayed, and I knew she would be a good support for him. So after visiting her in the hospital, John and I went home, and we saw the kids for the first time. And they said, John said, how is Cathy Anne? And John is named after my husband, John. Sometimes it gets confusing. So we said, well, she's a very sick baby. We have to pray for her. So we all said a prayer, Mary Christina and John. And so a little bit later, Mary Christina says to me, oh, Cathy Anne is going to get better. I pray to God. I know she'll get better. So I thought, wow, this is rather deep. We have to have a discussion about this. You know, you can ask God for something, but he's not our puppet that we can pull the strings and tell him what to do. We have to be able to accept whatever happens and put it in God's hands, even though we don't like it. Now, I would not like it if my baby is not going to be healthy, but I don't have a choice. So trying to help my children with their little questions that would arise, I felt helped me, because I was trying to make them comfortable and make them okay with a sick baby. So 5 days later, after she was admitted, the test came back, and we met with a cardiac surgeon. He said all of Cathy Anne's problems are attributed to trisomy 18, which is higher up on the chromosome chain than trisomy 21, which is Downs. And because of that, she had multiple physical problems. She probably couldn't see. She couldn't suck. The hospital had to tube feed her. So this was not what we were hoping to get. So I said, well, I want to take her home to die. Well, he stepped out of the room. He said, nobody has ever done this before in this hospital. Now, this was in 1977, and we were pioneers with this. So he steps out, and John turns to me and says, I don't want to take her home. I thought, my heavens, how could you say this? This is your baby. we talked about taking care of our parents if they would get sick. I'm an only child, and my father died in '64, a long time ago. And I had my mother who was healthy, but I wanted to be able to take care of her. And John's two parents were healthy, but we would take care of them as well. So we made this pact. Oh, yes, we'll take care of our parents. And now I'm saying, you don't want to take care of baby home, and we were going to take care of parents. This doesn't make sense. He said, but our parents is not our little baby. And the reason he was so afraid of bringing her home was, he said, Mary, you go out shopping. Oh, shopping was pure joy to me. I love to shop. And I'd say I'd be back in an hour, and I would come back 2 or 3 hours later, maybe sometimes even longer. And he was afraid he would be alone with this baby all by himself, and she would die. And then what would he do? He was very much afraid of death. So I assured him I wouldn't do that. I would not leave him. And my mother was there as well. She came up to stay with us to watch our children when I was going into the hospital. So I had so much fun with my mother. We went out for lunch. We went shopping. We had a great time. My kids were in a play group, and they were well taken care of. So I had time that was free. So anyway, I had to sit with that. There's nothing, I couldn't force this if he's so afraid of taking her home. So I just prayed over it. Well, that night when we came home, he's walking around the kitchen and he's looking at our kitchen. Now, my husband and his father started redoing the kitchen. This is the wrong time to redo your kitchen when you're expecting a baby, but she was late. So I said, let's just do it. So all my cabinets, dishes were in my dining room. My house was a mess, but it reflected how I was feeling inside. It was such a mess, and I was a mess inside. So anyway, he's walking around the kitchen and he says, Cathy Anne has much a right to be home in our house as Mary Christina and John. Oh, I couldn't believe this was just the next evening when he said no, and now he's saying yes. I was thrilled, but I knew I couldn't push, so I had to just be very quiet and calm. So it was wonderful. So the next day we called the hospital and told them we want to take her home. So the doctor wanted to be sure I knew how to feed her. So I had to do that a number of times. And the nurses showed me they were very good. I'm a nurse, but I'm a psychiatric nurse. And this medical stuff is not my cup of tea. So anyway, here I am with the tube, did fine. So we take her home, and she had a wonderful homecoming. John's mother and father came up, his sister and her 3 kids who were my kids' ages. And my mother, she stayed home with my mother-in-law, getting things ready for when we were going to come in. And when we opened the door to the house, we could smell the roast beef and the Polish dish that his mother brought. My mother brought the Irish American meal. It was just fantastic. And it was just so lovely. And as I'm holding her and everybody's around me and they want to see this baby, it almost felt like she was a normal baby for a second. And then I realized, no, she's not a normal baby. So I put her down. We ate this wonderful dinner. And just before dessert was being served, she starts to cry. So I go over to her, I pick her up, and I was breastfeeding her, so I had express milk, so I had that ready. I had the tube ready. So, and my mother holds the baby. I put the tube down her nose, and it comes out the same nose, the same side came out. I did that like 3 times. I said, now what am I going to do? So I thought of a nurse I knew. I worked together with her at Mount Sinai. I was teaching psychiatric nursing, and she was teaching maternal child. I knew she would know how to pass a tube. So I called her and I prayed, oh, please, God, let her be home. Well, Chris was home. She said, I'll be right over. She came over with the tube, and she said, leave it in place. It did it very easily. And I thought, oh, thank God. Well, I got through this huddle. It was it was difficult. You know, when you can't feed your baby, it's very frightening. So anyway, you know, there's always somebody you can call when you're in a pinch. And you just have to think of who can you call and not be afraid to ask. So she was a very good friend of mine. And so things went along okay. And the kids, oh, they all wanted to hold her, but now, you know, she was quiet. So we said, you'll have to wait a while. So a bit later, they each got to hold her. John could not wait to hold his baby sister, and he talked to her. And then it was Mary Christina's turn, and she held her. And then Denise and Joanne and Marie's kids, they all got a chance to hold her, and they were all so happy. We were so fortunate. This was a big celebration. And then I gave her to my mother-in-law to hold. I thought, I'm sure she wants to hold her. And my father-in-law was afraid to touch her. So he just held his arms around his wife, and that was fine for him. So everybody got a chance to get to know her. And this was so important. And it would be so different in the hospital because you know, you're wearing all these gowns and, you know, it was just very different. We were fortunate, though. We did take the children to see her at Columbia Presbyterian. So they did get to hold her there, but being home was so much better. So it was a blessing from God that we got to take her home. It was so wonderful to have this time with her, that we could hold her when we wanted to. So we had a little bassinet upstairs next to my bed, and that's where we put her for the night, that I would hear her when she cried. She really slept all night. She was no trouble at all. She never cried except when she was hungry. And so the days went on, and oh, she loved her bath. That was sheer pleasure for her. I put her in well, it wasn't really a tub. I held her and I just kind of sponge bathed her. Her umbilical cord had not fallen off, so she couldn't submerge in water. So I just washed her little head with the running water, and she just seemed so content. And actually, there were times I thought, I don't think she's retarded. She seems to understand, but that was me, and that had nothing to do with her. It was my wish, I guess. But anyway, John would bring his little toys to her. Mary Christina would do the same. And when I'm going to give her a bath, Mary runs in and says, I'll get the towel. John puts on music. He said we should play music, and he played one of his favorite songs while she's getting her bath. And it made things very comfortable for me and for the kids. And they took part in this. They were part of the experience of having a baby sister who was dying. And it was a wonderful experience. And we would have been deprived if we had not taken her home. Well, and to backtrack a little bit, the cardiac surgeon at Columbia said I would never do that to my children, to bring home a dying child. So, but that was his opinion. And then he said, my mother died when I was 8, and I'm fine. I didn't go to the wake. I didn't go to the funeral. And I thought, this poor man, I'm so glad he shared that with me, because if he hadn't, I would have just been angry with him for him telling me what I should do with my child. But her main doctor, Dr. John Driscoll, was very supportive in our taking her home. So he wanted me to do the tube feeding before I took her home. And we wanted to make sure I knew how to do that. So I did. And then we took her home, and my mother-in-law was there, my father-in-law, everybody. It was wonderful. Everybody got a chance to hold her and to have her part of our family, which was important to me because not many people knew her. So that was her homecoming. And we really we knew we made the right decision. It was the right thing to bring her home. So each day we took it as it came. The kids would get up in the morning. Oh, and then John went back to work. But I had my mother with me, helping me during the day. And I was lucky because he was off before this. And so we had a chance to get acclimated to the situation. So we'd take her for a walk. We had one outing with her. My husband taught at Manhattan College, and they had a picnic, and that's the only outing she went to. So we got to show her off to the faculty. They were also supportive. They thought she was beautiful. Well, I didn't think she was beautiful when I first saw her. The color, I think the ashen gray, and I thought she was ugly. But as I got to take care of her, I saw her as beautiful. And I was really able to bond with her because I had no attachment to her in the beginning at all. John had more attachment. He was able to go over to touch her arm and hold her, not me. So anyway, I'm very glad I had that opportunity. So the days went by, and a priest came over to visit us, and I wasn't home, but my mother was. And he blessed my mother and Cathy Anne, and he's a wonderful friend. I'll never forget him for coming to visit. And then the days went by. So by the end of the week, we continued. We had, and I can say we had fun with her. So 2 more weeks went by, and the third week, my mother was going on vacation with her friend Eileen. Now, she had planned this vacation months and months before, and she didn't want to go. And I said, Ma, I think you better go. My mother was doing our laundry. She's running up and down stairs. I was worried about her. She had just retired. She was a nurse also, a nurse from St. Vincent's where I went. And she was just wonderful, but I thought she needs a vacation. I know I'm going to miss her because she was invaluable, but I needed her to be healthy. I don't need her dying of exhaustion. So when we went to a picnic, everybody there had told her, you should go. Yeah, you go on the vacation. And a few other people said, go on vacation. And Stuart, the priest who came, oh, go on vacation. So she was validated. Yes, I can go on vacation. She wasn't taking my word for it, but everybody else's word was good. So the morning she leaves, we get up early and we're all kissing her goodbye. And it was wonderful. It was just a wonderful day. We're saying goodbye. Well, Cathy, as soon as she leaves, Cathy Anne wakes up fussy. She's crying, and she cried all day. Nothing could soothe her. I'm rocking her, holding her, and rocking her. I put her in the carriage, and the children are rocking her. As I say, this went on all day. By the time my husband came home, he takes one look at her and says, she looks awful. I thought, oh my heavens, it's hard to believe. And the radio was on, and this message comes blaring on, Elvis Presley died. And when I heard the word died, I said, oh my heavens, Cathy Anne is dying. So now I always associate Cathy Anne with Elvis Presley. So I called the pediatrician because I thought maybe he can give her something to soothe her a bit. So I took her to the office, and John stayed home with the kids. They went to bed, which was great because when I came home, I had time to talk with John. So the pediatrician gave her an injection. He said, this will calm her. And in the car going home, I was just praying she would be alive when I get home to John. And John, he was worried she would die before I got home with her. So as soon as I walk in the door, now my kitchen was being renovated, and we had a chair in the hallway. And so John sat down in it and he said, give her to me. So I hand Cathy Anne to her. And so he's Cathy Anne to him, sorry. And she took a breath. I took a picture. I took the next picture. And you know how the old-fashioned cameras did this whirling noise as it's ringing up? It did that, and Cathy Anne took her last breath. And for John, having her die in his arms changed his whole scariness of death. It was a gift from God through Cathy Anne. So it was really wonderful. There was nothing scary about it, which death was scary for him before that. So he'll always be grateful to his little baby who helped him with death. And we're all going to die sometime, so it's good to be a little more comfortable with death. So we sat and talked for a while, and it was great that the kids were in bed, so we had time to really spend this time together without having to, play with them and talk to them. So the next morning, as soon as the kids woke up, they run into our bedroom and they look at the cradle, and there's no baby. "Where's Cathy Anne?" says Johnny. I said, "She's downstairs. She died last night." So they go running downstairs, and John ran right over to her, and he looks at her, and her eyes were open. He said her eyes should be closed, so he closed them. And so we all said a prayer around Cathy Anne. We held hands, and we thank God for the gift of Cathy Anne, that we had her for some time. Even though it was a short time, it was wonderful that we had this time with her. Mary Christina was 3, so she didn't do it. She held my hand, didn't say a word. She just looked. But weeks later, she would say she did everything John did. She took that on. And I hadn't mentioned, but we had a cat that was hit by a car 2 weeks before we had Cathy Anne. And my mother didn't want to tell me that the cat died. And John came home from work, and he comes upstairs, and I'm folding laundry. He looked awful. I said, "John, what's the matter?" He said, "I can't tell you." I said, "What do you mean you can't tell me? Spit it out." He said, "I'm thinking something is wrong with my mother. She must have a fatal diagnosis." I was so worried. When you don't know, you would think the worst. He said, "Snowball was hit by a car and died." I love Snowball, but it was a relief. It wasn't my mother who was dying or died. So it was really helpful that, I knew. But she didn't want us to tell the kids. Her fear was, I'm going to the hospital, and John was coming with me. I had Lamaze for all my kids. So he was going to be with me, and she'd be alone with the kids. They're going to be crying for their cat, their mother, and their father. And that was hard. So we sat there, and they were able to, they cried, but we all prayed, and prayer helped us at this very hard time. So we had to decide where she was going to be buried, but we had done this in advance. My grandmother was buried, and my aunt not far from us. So that's where we were going to bury her. We called the cemetery and all. My son wanted her buried in the backyard next to the cat. I said, "It's against the state law. You cannot bury people in your backyard." So he was okay with that. And when we went to the cemetery and he saw how close it was, he said, "Oh, this is okay. This is not too far. It's okay. She's buried here." So he was very protective of her. So the priest said a prayer over the grave. And when we're about to leave, John starts crying. So my husband says, "What's wrong?" He says, "I want to see her placed in the ground." So John says to the grave diggers, "Please lower her into the ground." Now, he wouldn't explain anything, but later that night, he said, "I was afraid they would drop her, and I wanted to see her going into the ground very carefully." So that was important. And we were fortunate that when we had questions or he had questions, we were able to get answers for him and satisfy him, even though I didn't know why he wanted to see her put in the ground, but he was okay. And then as we're driving away from the cemetery, he said, well, it's not so far, so this is okay. And so that helped him. And then we made cupcakes later that day to remember Cathy Anne and to have cakes to celebrate her life. And as we're having our cupcakes, the phone rings, and it's a photographer who wanted to come and take a picture of Cathy Anne, of my newborn. I said, oh, I'm so sorry you didn't call sooner. She just died. I would have loved to have had a formal picture, but it never dawned on me. I never thought of that. We're big with pictures. We take pictures of everything, every occasion, every little occasion, big occasion. So I think that's the only thing that we didn't do with her that I would have liked to. So later on, I went to a meeting somewhere about pregnancy loss, and they had a panel about 4 couples who were supposed to talk about their experience. Nobody came. Nobody showed up. So I raised my hand. I said, oh, my daughter died, and this was in October, and she had died in August. So I said, she was at Columbia Presbyterian. It was a wonderful experience for her and for us. And I went on and on about what happened. Afterwards, this nurse, Barbara, came over to me and she wanted me to get involved with Columbia. So then I went down and I met with her doctor, John Driscoll, who was the head of the unit. And I started a hotline there. When a baby would die, the nurse would call me and I would call the family. And then I'd get back to them. And then from the hotline, I started a group for pregnancy loss. And it started in my house, and then I had it out, and people would come. Initially, I had mostly women, but then I had men as well. And it was like I kept saying, Cathy Anne has to have some purpose. And that was the purpose, to help others. I was so fortunate with my family who was so supportive. The doctors were so supportive, but that everybody didn't have that experience. So I was fortunate. I wanted to give back. So I thanked God that I came up with something that I could give some purpose to her brief life. And that's it. Does anybody have a question?
What inspired you to write the book so many years later?
I hate to write. I'm not a writer. And it's only when the Scarsdale Library started a group. So I said, well, this is my chance. I'll get involved with it. And it's been a wonderful experience. The group of people I meet are fantastic in the group. And I've been in for 11 years now. And so now I'm going to be writing children's books. I hope. Yeah, I have one, and I have it at a publisher, self-publishing.
In the chat, it says you took a topic shrouded in mystery and presented it in a family situation that becomes relatable to others. A useful tool for families. Well done. And that's from Jackie.
Oh, well, thank you, Jackie. That's very nice.
I love that you found a purpose for Cathy Anne's life and passing. That it
Yes.
was all the work you did afterwards, all the, no, I'm trying not to cry, all those lives that you touched and inspired, who would have had a very, I mean, it is a difficult time, but you helped them through it. That's
Yeah.
just,
And I think seeing somebody who has gone through this, it gave some purpose to Cathy Anne's life for me, but they can see you make it, you survive it. Oh, and I must mention, I had a baby after that, Anthony, and we're so fortunate. We really are. We have 3 kids, and we always include Cathy Anne, so I really have 4 kids, but one's in heaven. So,
Thank you,
what-
Ms. Mary, for this marvelous presentation. And before we continue with the comment question section, I would like to first thank you, officially for being our artivist today. Thank you for spending the afternoon together in Artivism. And like someone beautifully put it, explaining a topic that is shrouded in taboos, right?
yes.
Yes. Before we continue the conversation, I would just like to invite everyone for next Monday. We're going to have an open session in Artivism via Zoom. Just you can jump into the link, have a discussion, share some of your thoughts. Maybe we can brainstorm some programs or initiatives that you might be interested in working on, and that will be next Monday. It's already going to be October 7th at 4:30 p.m. You can find the link on the website, just like you did for this talk today. And for more information on this and all the series past and upcoming events, please visit www.adelphi.edu/artivism. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, that is at Artivism, the number 4 in a cipher, Share Humanity, or simply Google Artivism Initiative. Our YouTube channel is Artivism for Share Humanity, again with the cipher 4, not spelled out. And if you'd like to participate and get involved, please reach out to the Artivism team. As I mentioned earlier, now we can use this time together to continue exploring Miss Mary's experience, what she discussed, and how we took it. So this is the time where we can really come together and expand on the topic.
Yeah, and
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Something that I didn't mention, my husband was the one who got all the phone calls, and he hates the phone. But I would be out shopping or doing something, and the phone calls would come in, and he was wonderful with all the families. So I was lucky that I had a partner who really was very willing to help in this particular cause.
And Susan, yes?
Mary, I've enjoyed hearing you talk about this and also your book, which I have. And so my question goes beyond what you've talked about, which is to say, I know your faith was very important in pulling you and your family through. And I'm wondering if the technology, when you were pregnant with Anthony, did you have yourself tested to see that everything was okay? I mean, what were your feelings after going through this experience, which was on the one hand amazing and life-changing with Cathy Anne, and then wondering if you did wonder if this could possibly happen again, or where your thoughts were, or if you pursued any tests, or how you handled the pregnancy with Anthony after the ordeal with Cathy Anne?
Well, I knew I wouldn't have an abortion. So if a test, they'd have to do an amniocentesis. And if they did that and it turned out to be trisomy 18, I wouldn't have an abortion. So there was no point in having a test. So what I did was prayed a lot and put all my confidence in God that we could cope with whatever happens. And and a side story, we had a kitten that it was adorable, but it was hit by a car. And my son says, we have a kitten hit by a car. We had a baby that died. I hope this baby isn't going to die. So he was, really right on with his thoughts. And I said, no, we pray that the baby will be healthy. We can't control it, but we do the best we can. And prayer helps. And we all prayed then that the baby would be healthy. And the baby was healthy.
Mary, do you feel the health system has changed in maybe encouraging and not discouraging people to take their babies home that are in situations like this?
Oh, yes, it's changed so much now. This is very common now for somebody to take home a baby who could be dying, and but we were the very first. Nobody had ever taken a baby home from Columbia Presbyterian to die. That's why, I mean, even the primary doctor, John Driscoll, he said half the staff is going to think you're wonderful. This is great to do. The other half are going to think you are nuts. But, I don't care what anybody thinks. This was my baby, and this is what I wanted to do. And thank God John changed his mind. And I think the other thing that helped us, we had this cat that died. I didn't go into the whole story, but my mother didn't want to tell me the cat died, didn't want to tell the children. If we didn't have that experience with the cat, I don't know how the family would have been with my taking home a baby to die. My in-laws and my mother, I don't know how they would have been. Nobody said a word. Everybody thought it was and my family thought it was wonderful. So that was another blessing that we had from a cat. I love animals, and they're very much a part of my life.
And we have your children's book to look forward to. What will that be about?
Well, that's about death also. It's about a cat, Whisper, and a ferret, and Anthony. He's in the story. And remembering Whiskers, helping children to deal with death and grief. And that will be published at some point. And then I have another one that I'm working on death. And then when I finish those two on death, I'm going to a happy book on a 10-year-old Tess and her parrot, her umbrella cockatoo, Gracie. I have an umbrella cockatoo, so I'm modeling it after my parrot. And she's so much fun. And this book is so much fun too.
Miss Mary, you mentioned that you went to the library, and that's where you kind of connected to your writing, right? Could you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about that, a little more?
Oh, sure.
Storyteller, and many people in the audience might want to maybe be definitely, right?
Oh, I
And
lost
they
you.
might feel a little timid in the sense of, oh, I don't have any experience writing, oh, I don't have any experience telling stories, oh no, that's too personal to tell, who's gonna want to listen, and all those things that come through mind, right? Any thoughts about that, please?
Oh, yes. I tell you, at the Scarsdale Library, at first it was Jim and Han who was the instructor. And then I had her for a year. And then I had Barbara Josselson for 10 years. She's wonderful. And the group is so supportive. They just the way they critique what you're writing, which is why we're there. We don't want everybody to say, oh, this is wonderful. If it's not, they're honest, but the way they frame it, it's palpable. You can accept it, And I'd recommend anybody who's thinking about writing to join a writing group. It's a wonderful experience. And every Friday I'm in a writing group. I'm in person 1 week, the next week I'm online. So I'm in 2 different groups. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. And what about the part of sharing personal stories that many times we put our barriers ourselves in that regard, right? How to overcome those mental obstacles that we might pose to ourselves.
Well, I think that is so personal. I mean, and it's individual for everybody. Some people may not want to share something so personal, and maybe they want to write about it, but not share it with other people. And that's okay. But if they want to share something personal, the group is very sensitive to people, and they really support them in what they're doing or trying to do. And we've had people share very personal things, and whatever happens in that group stays in the group. We don't go out and talk with friends or anybody about what was discussed. It's sacred space when somebody is talking about something very personal.
Very nice. Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Miss Mary, you've been so inspiring. It's so nice listening to you. It really is. When you are writing your next book, reach out to us again. Maybe you can present, even if it's in its beginning stages.
Oh,
You,
sure.
you've inspired us all to sit down and write and to share our stories. Um, this was really nice. I mean, brought tears to my eyes many times, but
Uh,
good tears.
oh, well,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Well, thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity. Thanks.
Carolina, do you want to take it away?
Any other comments or questions from the audience? Or in the chat if you'd like to put something for Miss Mary? Okay, while you work on that, Miss Mary, here in ARTIVISM, we have the tradition of closing each presentation with a key takeaway for action. What will be your key takeaway from your presentation today that the audience can go and put into practice?
Well, I think if you have an idea and it's important to you, go for it and try to get whatever group you're trying to join to understand where you're coming from and do it. Just like I did, I wanted to take her home, and fortunately I did. Does that answer your question?
Yes, therefore just go with your ideas and then make sure that the group understands where you're coming from, kind of, right?
Right, right. And if it's important to you, then you should try to get help with it. And if it's a group, that's supportive, you will get help with whatever it is.
I think that also goes back to something you said early on, not to be afraid to ask, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, that's very important. Yes, just like when I had to call my friend to ask her to come over and do the tube feeding. Yes. Yeah, and people are wonderful. They really are. They were very supportive, especially my family and friends, and but that's what helps get people through. You're not isolated and just in your own little world. When you share your little world with others, you get help.
And what about Miss Mary in regards to, like more of a just philosophical question? We can
Oh,
pose it, say,
I'm
in
sorry.
regards to
You're breaking up. I
go ahead.
miss. Yeah, try again.
More of a philosophical questions in regard to death and our current society that values so much I guess you can say more of a certain stage in life rather than others, and by doing that they believe that perhaps they can cheat death and that everybody's going to be eternal, right? And even if in social media, in television or any media platform, you basically don't hear this topic at all, right? It's always evaded. What would be something along those lines from all your experience in this bereavement world, right? Then you can share with us as well.
Oh, yes. We live in a death-denying society. And you were right. Some people do act as though it's an option we have. Well, it's not an option. We're all going to die. And I think as you learn more about death, you become more comfortable with it. When I was working on my BS, I had a nurse teacher who did a whole thing on death, and it was so helpful. And I think people just need to be exposed more to it. Oh, and my husband and we used to give a talk about Cathy Anne at Manhattan College each semester in a death and dying course. And that helped a lot of people. And it's not only for a baby, but it's for other relatives who could die.
Thank you so much, Mary. This was so beautiful, so
Oh.
inspiring. And you're right. I mean, being with somebody when they pass, it was something like, I always feared, right? I mean, we were always sheltered from, death and dying and going to wakes and funerals and all that. When my mom passed away, it was something I was terrified of, like actually being there when she passed. And the nurse there at the time said, sometimes people choose who will be there and who will not. So if, as a loved one is going to to get something to drink, the person will pass, or they
Yeah.
wait for someone to come in. And my mother passed when my daughter and I were there, and we were waiting for others to come. And, at first the fear sunk in, but then it was a blessing, right? It was, like she chose us to be there. That's how I saw it. She chose us to be there. And as it was happening, it seemed like eternity, right?
Yeah.
I thought, I am never going to forget this. I'm going to have nightmares the rest of my life. Like I'm gonna like see this when I think of my mother, and it's not. It's not. Was so blessed to have been there.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah. So we shouldn't shelter our children from, of course, many things we should and must, but not from, everybody goes. There's a
Yes.
we all have to go. So thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. Carolina, do you want to finish up? If nobody has
Yeah,
anything
I
else?
have another comment. Now that we have you, Miss Mary, I want to ask about why in your studies and your research do you think society has come to being a death denying society? What is in it that is pushing that model forward?
Well, it's frightening. Death, you're going to the unknown. If you have a faith, you're going to see your relatives again, you're going to see God, you're going to see all the saints, and it's comforting. But it's not always comforting to everybody. People are just afraid because it's the unknown. Nobody has come back and said, you know what? I just went to heaven and it was great. I can't wait to go again. You don't have that. So you just have to work with, what you have and explore people's belief system. An atheist can be a very spiritual person and have very close ties to something that's helping them. So yeah, well, as a nurse and I worked in hospice for years doing bereavement. You find out what is helping the person. What does that person need? What is going to connect them, to the afterlife or connect them to something? And that's and everybody's different. And we never, I mean, working, we never judge anybody. Never say, oh, you shouldn't say this, you shouldn't do this, and never. You accept people where they are and you work from where they are to where they can grow and learn.
Yes, and another component, it's also that sometimes it's not so much the person that is passing through the sickness per se, but it's rather the family that do not want to let go.
Yes.
That's another added level, because the person that is in the bed, say, right, might be like, just let me be, let me go, because I'm suffering so much. But the family member at the bedside, it's like you said, that fear of, oh, I know if that happens, this world of emotions is going to come upon me, and I might not be ready to confront them, right?
Yes. Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an added burden for the person who is dying. If the person who is dying is ready to go, and say the daughter's saying, oh, stay, don't leave me, I can't live without you, that puts an added burden on the patient. So the daughter needs to be helped, to help the mother to be able to let go, and for the daughter to be able to say, I'm going to be okay. You can go. I will find my way, or whatever. And that's important. And again, there's no judgment. Somebody who does not want to lose their mother, you can't blame them. But you have two patients there. You have the daughter who doesn't want to let go, and you have the patient who maybe is hanging on for the daughter and is suffering. So it's something you have to work out. Takes time and patience and understanding. And that's why on my work with hospice, I loved it. Really, it's so rewarding working with the dying. You know, they are at their worst. I mean, they're dying, and the bereaved are at their worst, and you see them really blossom. The dying patient, you know, can say, well, I'm ready to go, and she knows that her family's going to be okay. And the person, the child who is losing the mother can realize, oh, I'm okay and I will be okay. And you can tell the mother that she taught her so much about life. She's able to use that now. An example.
Yes. And on that, Ms. Mary, also, when do you think we should start incorporating bereavement conversations? Say, you know, here in Artivism, we always think of how to better society, right? Through
Yes.
the arts. And, you know, your art as a storyteller, as sharing and being present with death. When should we start it? Like, you have that next step of writing children's book that talk about it. Should we have a sense of a sort of, you know, children's bereavement course in schools, or only when a tragedy occurs should they be exposed to it? Should it be part of everyday conversations? What do you think about all that?
Yes, I think the more you can learn about death, the more you can get desensitized to it, that you can accept it. Well, it's part of life. It's not something you have to say, oops, I got to run, you know? Um, and especially, and with children, especially the death of a pet. That, and unfortunately, parents often want to just have the pet disappear and not do anything. And even if it's a goldfish, if this was the child's goldfish, don't flush it down the toilet. Have a funeral for the pet, have a little ceremony, and have the child involved and let them know it's sad. It's very sad. And you can't just go out and replace a goldfish like you can a broken lamp. And you can't replace people like that. But our society wants to make you feel good. So they say, oh, you know, like, I mean, some people have told widows, oh, you can get another husband. You're young. Well, that's not a thing to say to somebody whose husband just died, you know, but this is what we do. So the more you can, I think starting with pets is a good way with children. Because then when a person dies, they will have some experience with death. Does that answer your question?
Definitely, yes. Thank you. And also, you know, worldwide, that there are different models on how that particular society deals with the infirm. You know, some countries keep the elderly, say, at home. Others put them in nursing homes, and others have other methods. And all of that is that separation or closeness to what is coming, and all of that it entails. But I think that will be a conversation for part 2 of Miss Mary's ARTIVISM presentations. But thank you, Miss Mary. We look forward, like Professor RG said, when you have your children's book, please reach out again. We look forward to hearing about it. And thank you for all the marvelous advice and thought-provoking commentary, right? Because we need to do something about how children are being exposed to something as normal as breathing, right? Because like you
Yes.
said, everybody's gonna die, but
Yes.
yet they're sheltered in a way that it's surreal almost, right?
Yes.
They want to be in another dimension where this is not part of life.
Yes. Yes. Sure,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be glad to present the other side, you know, carrying it further anytime.
Thank you, thank you, thank you to Professor RG. Thank you to ARTIVISM, also to our sponsors, Adelphi University, Sing for Hope, and Government's Libraries at Teachers College, Columbia University. We hope to see you all again among the various presentations that are still coming for season 8. And be on the lookout for some of the open calls for the poster and for the spring exhibition. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody, and thank you for being here with us.
And thank you all for coming, who attended this.
Thank you. Thank you. Be well, everyone. Have a good
Yeah.
night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.